introduce yourself to the audience?
Well, my name's Luke Rounds. I was born and raised in Missoula, Montana. Uh, lived my whole life there up until about 2004, where I moved out to Rapid City, South Dakota, and now I live in the beautiful Black Hills of the South Dakota.
Perfect. So, since it's kind of new, let's go ahead and start our show with the trailer of our movie that we're going to discuss. And go right into it.
It is often those we live with and love, the ones we care about the most, who elude us. Even now, when I look back on the Montana of my youth, I long to understand what happened there and why.
Norm, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Minister, I guess. What are you gonna be?
Professional fly fisherman?
There's no such thing.
Or is it?
My brother Paul and I grew up in a time when the land was still untouched.
In Montana, there are three things we're never late for: church, work, and fishing.
It was a world of wonder and possibility.
I'm in love with Jessie Burns. With all the fish in the river. I'm not like her.
But it was a tough world, too.
We're picking your brother up too much lately.
Why is it the people who need the most help won't take it?
I know how we can go down in history.
I understand he's changed the spelling of our name.
I want you to know I can help.
Boys, what have you done?
You're in debt up to your damn neck. I'll be fine.
From boys to men.
The world is full of bastards. The number increasing rapidly the further one gets from Missoula, Montana. Amen.
In life and in love. All memories become one. And a river runs through it. From Academy Award-winning director Robert Redford comes the classic story of an American family.
So, Luke, does it make you homesick every time you see that trailer?
It gives me chills every time I see that trailer. Homesick and chills. I mean, it's just, you want to be reminded of what, where both of us grew up. You watch that trailer and, man, just the memories just start coming in very thick. So.
Absolutely. I actually just rewatched the film earlier this evening, just so it'd be super fresh in my mind. And I absolutely love the very beginning, how they kind of roll through some old photos of Missoula.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of the entrances at Southgate Mall, the halls of memory, as they started doing it in, I think, late 90s.
Yeah, we were in high school and they started putting that in there, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah. So every time I see the opening, it just makes me think of the mall and misadventures there in high school.
Oh, yeah. Well, I know when I see that opening, too, it's like you see those dirt streets, like Front Street and Broadway and stuff. You recognize them because some of those buildings are still there.
Absolutely.
It's just like, you see it and it just reminds you of home, and it was a different time back then, but it's just like how it's grown now and stuff and changed. But you can still see that essence of Missoula at the beginning of the movie, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. And, even though this film is based in Missoula, it wasn't filmed in Missoula.
That's correct. There's only a few scenes that were actually filmed in Missoula, and they're just a few shots of the original church. Most of it was filmed Although the river scenes, I think, were over on the down between Bozeman and Billings over there on the Boulder, I believe, and then
The Gallatin.
yeah, on the Gallatin. There's a lot of rivers they used, and part of the reason that was the Blackfoot at the time when they were filming it was not the same river. Now it's back to where it used to be with a lot of conservation and things like that. That river is now healthy again, but when they went and looked at it, it wasn't the river that they wanted to shoot.
Yeah.
So they chose a different, at least they kept it in Montana, which was pretty cool. But they chose a different river. So
there was one particular scene actually in the movie filmed in Wyoming.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
In fact, I actually have the clip ready to show you.
I guess I did not know that about the Wyoming part. Yeah, I'd like to see that.
Yeah, I actually kind of dug in, looked at it, and I found out, oh, no wonder I've never seen the waterfall. Because
from the shooting the shoots, you think that scene?
Exactly.
Yeah,
that was
I didn't know where.
from Wyoming.
Okay, because that made sense. Because I was thinking on the Blackfoot, I've always wondered. I'm like, what do they mean shooting the shoots? Because there's not really a shoot that I know of on the Blackfoot except for Thibodeau Falls. And so what I assumed is that was supposed to be Thibodeau Falls, where if you try to go down that in the springtime, good luck. Now in the summer, you can float that anytime you want. And I've been knocked off many a tube on that, going down Thibodeau Falls. But that's what I assumed they were trying to show in the movie is Thibodeau, because that's close to Missoula. I mean, it's just past Johns Route up below Whitaker Bridge, but not a big giant waterfall like in the movie at all.
No. So let's go ahead and take a look. Actually in Wyoming.
Huh. I did not know that. I always wondered where they filmed that because, I mean, a waterfall like that, there's not many. I mean, we have some, but, they're big waterfalls, so.
Yeah. Obviously Great Falls too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
one thing about that scene at the beginning when they're floating, there's a lot of places on the Blackfoot that look like that, where they're running down the bank and stuff. And then up by 9 Mile Prairie, you got a lot of rocky areas too. I've canoed it before, and it looks a lot like that. So they did a good job of representing what it looks like, I think, for sure.
Well, I kind of made reference that it wasn't actually filmed in Missoula, but I got to admit, even their faux Missoula 1909 representation, it feels like Front Street.
Yeah.
In fact, that lumber yard where they have the little fight as kids.
Yeah.
If you didn't know better, that could have been the old lumber yard there on 3rd Street.
Yeah.
Which is now apartments of all things.
Right. Yeah.
Or the lumber yard that used to be next to McCormick Park.
Yeah. There's or they have the White Pine. My grandpa worked at for years, milling lumber on the north side of town, and looked like that, with the big commercial buildings and stuff. And yeah.
So great job. In fact, the scene with the boys kind of teasing the brothel.
Yeah.
If you didn't know better, that almost looks like the Missoula Textile Building.
Yeah.
From the backside.
Backside of Stocks with the big staircase.
So let's go ahead and actually watch the very opening.
Okay.
And I found a little additional photo that I added into the trailer or the opening scene. So.
All right. Excited to see it. I love the opening scene. It's such a great opening.
Yeah, it just amazes me they actually use that, and I'd love to know if it was video editing that they did to make the Pebble drive.
Yeah,
In the
I
first
always
couple
wondered
games.
if they went and put it on the asphalt or something to make it look that way, or if they did video, because the video editing in the early '90s wasn't that great, you know. So
No, the most spectacular video editing for '92, Terminator 2.
well, yeah, yeah, but this
But
this wasn't the James Cameron budget for
no, no,
that thing. So.
that's for sure. But
Yeah,
still,
that opening scene, just, I mean, man, just nostalgic. You just look at that, and it's just, especially that first, when they're looking down the valley there, the Blackfoot coming where it meets the Clark Fork, and they come into Missoula there. I mean, I think about to the left, the University of Montana, Washington Grizzly Stadium sits there now, and the whole University of Montana, it's just blank right there, you know. And then to the right, you have all the old Bonner Mill and stuff, and you know, it's just empty. It's just such a cool scene seeing that, how it was untouched, you know, at that point.
yeah, what I really love is when Norman comes back for the 4th of July and he meets Jesse for the very first time.
Yeah.
I could believe that's at Fort Missoula for the 4th of July.
Yeah. Well, they got that big gazebo out there at the Fort Missoula. I mean, it looks, I don't know where they filmed that part at, but it looks like Fort Missoula. It darn right does. So,
And I got to say, even the when they do the church picnic, and Norman has to go meet up with Jesse to meet when her brother comes in on the train.
yeah. Yeah.
You know, I know in my mind the building they're using as the train station is absolutely incorrect for that time.
Yeah.
Because if he's coming by train to Missoula, it's going to be Milwaukee Station.
Yeah, which is a landmark in Missoula and looks nothing like that, you know. But yeah, but I mean, besides us Missoulians, not many people are going to know that. I don't think,
that's
you know.
for sure.
But if you know what the Milwaukee Station looks like, it's totally different than that. I mean, it's night and day. But I mean, it's such a landmark in Missoula. My mom had a picture of it hanging in our house growing up.
Oh wow.
Yeah, like it was a painting someone did in town that we had hanging in our house. Small, but it was still of the original Milwaukee Station. So
I love walking what would be the train tracks by Milwaukee Station.
Yeah.
Which is now the River Rock path, if you will.
Yeah.
It goes all the way down to the campus, down, I think at this point, with all the little add-ons.
Yeah.
It used to just go to McCormick Park, but they've now added it so you can get down to that new apartment complex on 3rd Street.
Yeah.
Where the mill
I think it goes all the way down, and I think the other way they extended it too, because they put that new golf course in that you can actually cross the river and get. I mean, it goes a ways now. So
does it?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's all part of the Bear Route Trail system now.
Yeah. Yep.
And I can still remember, even as a kid, riding next to the train tracks to go from my house to McCormick, the original McCormick pool.
Right. Right. Yeah, the original pool with the high dive, and yeah.
And that horrible pool surface. I don't know about you, but my toes, every single time I swam there, just playing around, they got cut up every single time.
Oh yeah, I think every kid, your feet started to get kind of calloused almost with that pool very often because it beat them up. That's for sure.
Oh, the memories.
Yeah, the train tracks and stuff. I remember Buckhouse Bridge and jumping off that into the Bitterroot River as a kid and stuff. I mean, just the fact that, you know, growing up in Missoula and you got 3 huge rivers coming into town right there with the Bitterroot, the Clark Fork, and the Blackfoot. Just, I mean, I didn't realize how lucky we were and how it was so amazing growing up in Missoula until you move away. And it's like, holy cow, that place is amazing. I got to get back someday. So,
yeah, for me, down here in Nevada, every time I want to kind of feel a little homesick, I drive up to Markleyville.
Mm-hmm.
My wife's a librarian up there, and it does remind me of like driving down Highway 200,
Sure.
going to see my grandparents in Cedar Lake, because it's just a little open range, pine trees everywhere, a river running along on the right hand side is driving there. So, or I go up to Tahoe.
Yeah.
Either way, you just feel like you're in the mountains, like you're part of it,
Yeah.
like you are in Missoula Valley.
Yeah, no, that's why I feel fortunate living in the Black Hills. They're small. I call them my mini mountains because they're nothing like the mountains in Missoula and western Montana, but they're super accessible, and there's areas up here and wilderness areas that I can get into that you'd swear you were in Montana with the trees and the way that the forest looks and stuff. The fishing's a little different out here. Growing up in Missoula with the large rivers like the Blackfoot and stuff, I was so used to fishing the big rivers. And then when I first moved to the Black Hills, I really didn't think there was much fly fishing out here at all, because there was these tiny little creeks and stuff. And I was like, what's that? That's not, you don't fish that. And then after about 5 years, I finally tried it and found out it's a gem out here in South Dakota. There's some amazing fly fishing spots, and it's way more technical because of the small streams and you got to sneak up on the fish and stuff, but it's top notch up here too. So that's one way for me to feel like I'm at home, is getting up in the Black Hills and some of these nice streams like Spring Creek and stuff, and you start fly fishing and you're not thinking about anything else but what you're doing at that moment. And it's just such a stress reliever. I love it.
Now, have you ever heard how Robert Redford actually got involved with this book?
No, I don't think so. Now, the one thing I was going to say, in the opening scene, they got Robert Redford's, he's narrating it, but in the trailer, that's not Robert Redford narrating the trailer.
I noticed that myself.
Yeah, I'm not sure who's narrating the trailer, but it's not Robert Redford. And I heard somewhere where, like, I think that's the old guy at the end or at the very beginning or the end of the movie. They had him do it, but they Robert Redford's got such a commanding voice.
He has the perfect voice for this narration.
I mean, he does. It's like him and James Earl Jones and Paul Newman. A few of those guys just have those voices that are so commanding, and it sounds perfect when he does it. So
this is one of the few times I would say Morgan Freeman would not be the right narrator.
Right. I agree. Yeah.
There's so many times that I think anytime you hear Morgan Freeman doing a voiceover, it's magical.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
Shawshank Redemption definitely comes to my mind.
Oh yeah. Excellent movie.
I'm seeing our next movie, I think. But yeah, Robert Redford just did an amazing job. So let me actually let him explain how he got involved.
Cool.
So when I picked this book up, and the first line was, in our family, there was no clear line between religion and fly fishing. I thought, wow. So I turned to the last line. The last line was, I am haunted by waters. And that was it. Then I read the book and I thought, I have to make this film. I was told that the author, Norman MacLean, was an extremely difficult, tough guy who never wanted to see this book leave the fact that it was a book. He did not want to see it go to television or film. He was adamant. And he was a tough, tough guy. He was a teacher at the University of Chicago. So I decided I'm going to go try to do this. So I went to meet with him. And he said, I don't want this made into a film. And I said, I understand that, and I'd like to try to convince you to let me make it. So we argued back and forth, and he pushed against me, and I pushed against him. Finally, I said, I took kind of a fairy tale approach. I said, I tell you what, I'll make a deal with you. I'll come see you 3 times, and I will come tell you why I would like to make the film and why the film should be made, and you can tell me why you don't think it should be made. And we'll argue, and we'll chat, and so forth, and then I'll go away. If we're still talking, I'll come back a second time, and I'll push again, and you'll push back on me, and we'll get into our tug of war, and I'll leave. And I'll give you 2 weeks in between each meeting to think it over if you won't even see me again. So he said, okay, come back. I went back a third time, and we argued and argued and argued. And finally I said, okay, here's the deal. I'm done. I want to make the film, and it's your call. He said, okay, go ahead. So then it took me 2 years to get a screenplay. And I couldn't figure out why I was having such a hard time getting a screenplay of this wonderful book. And Richard Friedenberg, the writer that I hired to do the screenplay, was really having a struggle because what he was doing was just focusing on the characters. The brother, Paul, who was this golden boy with a dark side. Norman himself as a young brother. Their father, who was a preacher. And so he was trying to embody the characters, but nothing was coming out. It was flat, it was dull. I thought, well, what? I couldn't figure out why this was happening. So then I looked at it and I suddenly realized, wait a minute. What the power of this book is the narrator, Norman MacLean. It's his words describing the family. It's his words describing his brother. His words describing the beauty of fly fishing. That's the real power of the book. So I said to Richard Friedenberg, I said, hey, you know, we're missing a boat here. What we need to create a narrator. We're going to have to create a character that I'd like to open the film and end the film with, like a very old man who's coming out, getting his equipment together to fish. But he's very old. When he gets to the edge of the water, I'm going to have his memory start to cook in. And his memory will be the words of Norman, who wrote it. That's how we solved the problem. And so we did it, we made the film, and the sad thing was he finally let me make the film. And he said, I'm not going to stand in your way, it's yours. But then he died before I could show him the film, so I'm kind of sad about that. Anyway, having said that, you all, it's late, I don't want to keep you waiting too long, but that's the story about how this film came to be, and for me it was very, very personal. And so therefore, as we cut to where we are now, the idea that Brian Wimmer, who was born and bred here, has his own unit for fly fishing, that we could bring that forward and have that be a big part of Sundance is for me a thrill. Anyway, having said that, I hope you enjoy the film. Thank you.
So how's that?
You know, after watching it, I have seen that before. I forgot. It's been years, but yeah, that and he did such a good job with the way the film showed that with, like, it was Norman's thoughts and stuff, and they took those parts right out of the book. The end scene, I mean, the last thing that they talk about is something else. And I don't know if we want to go there yet because there's a lot of that movie.
No, I kind of want to keep that.
Yeah,
for wrapping
we'll talk about that later. One thing that I was thinking about as we're just talking about this, and just as Robert Redford was talking, I'm thinking about the opening scenes again and seeing the river. And I feel fortunate, even though living in South Dakota, that at least once or twice a year, I go back up to Missoula and fish the Blackfoot. My dad taught me how to fly fish on the Blackfoot River. It was like he said, their family river. That was our family river growing up. We spent countless hours camping, fishing on the Blackfoot River, mainly up in that the corridor is what they call it, which is up by there's a place called Red Rocks up there, a big cliff. It's in a red rock, and we fish right below that. But a few years ago, I think it was 2 years ago now, my daughter's old enough now where I took her up there and we floated the Blackfoot on tubes and stuff. And she just loved it. I mean, it was like blown away by it. And I got one quick funny story I want to tell you about what happened. So I took my tube, and the actually hat I'm wearing right now, it's my Montana Grizzly fly fishing hat. I got it on, and my brother and I, Adam, who's my younger brother, and both of us love fly fishing, and Dad taught us both, but we go up below Whitaker Bridge, and we're going to go float Thibodeau Falls. My daughter's too young, and the girls are a little nervous. They're going to meet up with us below it. And so we go down Thibodeau. I got my GoPro, and I get flipped off, and I lose my hat in the river, this hat.
Oh,
I'm like, oh crap, it's gone. I'm back on my tube, and we're floating, and it's nowhere to be seen. And so we get back down the river a little farther, and we get to a calm area. We meet up with all the girls and stuff, and I tell my wife, I'm like, yeah, I lost my favorite hat. I was like, it's gone, but it is what it is. It's in the Blackfoot. We're floating about 30 feet down. I look to the right. This hat is floating in the river right next to me. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And so I grab it and put it back on and stuff. I was like, and so at that moment, I told my brother, I was like, the river just gave me my hat back. That's pretty awesome. My dad, when we would fly fish at times, stand in the river, he's like, if you're quiet, you can hear the river talking to you. And I've always believed that. And when especially if you're by yourself and stuff, you get lost in that moment and all your thoughts and stuff go away and you just absorb the moment. And in fact, there's been times fishing on the Blackfoot and other rivers where you're casting and all of a sudden I catch myself just staring off into the woods or down the river, watching an eagle or something, and then realize your line's just sitting there flopping in the water. But it's so mesmerizing and just it's such a stress relief thing too. Fly fishing
absolutely.
But I just a little side story. I just thought that was pretty cool. That
it ties very well into one of the opening scenes of the movie, where right after the Sunday service, Norman and his brother used to walk with their dad along the river in between services, and he basically almost said the exact same thing.
Yeah.
That if you can listen closely, you can actually hear the words of God, or the words of God are under the
rocks and
under the rocks. Yeah.
Yeah, that's that scene reminds me of my dad taking my brother and I up the Blackfoot and walking and fishing and just enjoying the beautiful river it was and just the outdoors of Montana. It's just it's so spectacular, and that's why I love this movie so much too. Is that if you're feeling homesick and I want to put that thing in and it just the memories come rushing back.
And even though, as we said, it's not filmed in Missoula, it mimics so many things so close.
Yeah. I mean, there's some scenes they show, and it's not the Blackfoot, but it looks like the Blackfoot corridor going down there. I mean, they've done. I mean, if you don't know, you got to look hard to realize that it's not that. It looks. They did a great job.
Oh, absolutely. So you said you're a fly fisherman. So
that's right.
Is the shadow cast a real cast?
It is. You can do it. It's hard. I'd say the hardest part about shadow casting is finding a space big enough to do it. Because the one thing I would say that the movie makes, when people watch it that don't know about fly fishing, they think when you go fly fishing, you sit there and get to whip your line back and forth. It's all these false casts and these big things, and really you'll find is you're doing a lot of, and they show this too, roll casts, flip casts, because you usually have something behind you, and every fly fisherman knows you're going to end up tying yourself to a tree at one point and stuff for losing the fly. And but in this time of year in late summer on the Blackfoot, there's spots where you can get on big rocks and do things like shadow casting. That's something that takes years to perfect, but it is something like a person can do where you're bringing that fly right next to the water and stuff. But definitely hard.
Well, let's take a look at how they did it in the film.
All right. Sounds good.
Now, didn't you tell me something special about that fish?
So, yeah, they're actually, a lot of the fish in the movie were not real fish. They're mechanical. They used like rubber fish that were like robots almost to flip and flop because, well, unfortunately, the actors were not the greatest at catching fish. And in a movie, you got to get the fish on there. So they were using mechanical fish for a lot of the fish scenes, actually. So,
and it does say at the end of the film that no animals or fish were harmed in the making of this film. So I was always wondering, was it all catch and release? But mechanical makes sense.
Yeah, mechanical fish. They did a good job because they look real. I mean, the fish do. They did a good job with it. And I think they used some, for especially some of the close-ups, real trout. But when they're jumping out of the water and stuff, and those are mechanical fish.
I then saw something remarkable. For the first time, Paul broke free of our Father's instruction into a rhythm all his own.
Everybody's brother.
They're both.
You always have to make it a competition.
Oh, absolutely.
I'd say the Lord has blessed us all today. It's just that he's been particularly good to me.
I admit, if I had boys, I'd say that to them.
Oh yeah. So my father, to this day, and my brother still, I competed with this way. We had there was 3 goals whenever we went out fly fishing or fishing period. First fish, biggest fish, and most fish. And if you could win all 3, you were the winner for that day. But that was the goal, is to whoever caught the first one, the biggest, and the most. So
yeah, that sounds like the core of any competition.
Yeah, and the sad thing was my dad usually won all 3. So we call him the fish whisperer. So it's just he's the best fly fisherman I know to this day. And yeah, I was fortunate to be taught by him how to fly fish.
I think one of the best fly fishing scenes in the movie is when when Paul goes out the last time with his brother and father, and they kind of reference it at the end of the movie that Norman didn't even see the fish. He saw the fisherman.
Right.
Because it was just perfection. So let's take a look at that scene here. And in the book, they go on to describe that, as I said, at that moment, he saw the fisherman, not the fish.
Right. Right.
So.
I think some people would see that scene and think that's Hollywooded, how he's floating down the river because that fish is so big and stuff. But there are some massive bull trout in the Blackfoot. There used to be a lot more. you're not even allowed to fish for them anymore in the Blackfoot. If you catch one by accident, you got to put it right back in and release it. But they are the king of the river. I mean, the alpha predator of the river. And there's some big giant bull trout that can get up to 3 foot long or bigger. And I've never caught a big one like that, but my father caught one, and it took him a good half hour to get that thing running up and down the river, giving the pole to my brother, and just, I mean, falling in the river. And it's there's some fish in there that take, especially if they get out in that main current, you got to let them have line and try to run down the bank with them and stuff. So that scene can be fairly accurate, actually. So.
And, to me, that scene almost feels like John's route.
Oh, yeah, it does. And then looking at that, when they're looking back up there at that corridor area, you stand up by Red Rocks and almost up to Montour Creek, and that looks just like that area. I mean, it's not it, but it looks darn close. So, yeah. And I think Robert Redford's always been a huge conservationist. Supporter of wildlife and keeping areas like they are, not damaging them, wanting to keep them, so that everybody can enjoy them for years and years and years.
I think that's one of the things that he pushes with the Sundance Film Festival. So.
Yeah, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it keeps popping in my head here. We were talking about how Norman didn't see, he saw the fisherman then finally. And one of my favorite quotes comes from Henry David Thoreau, where he says, and I might butcher this a little bit, but most men go fishing all their lives, not realizing it's not fishing what they're after. And that's the truth. I mean, I think as a young man fly fishing, and I still don't consider myself an old man, but when I was growing up, you're out there trying to catch fish. You want to catch fish. Now I go up for the stress relief and just the peacefulness and just letting your whole self become a part of the nature and stuff. And then also passing along that knowledge of fly fishing in the wilderness and stuff to people like my daughter and stuff. She gets a kick because now when we go fishing, I try to get her on the fish, and we went not long ago and she caught 9 fish and I caught 1. And to her, now that's all that matters. But for me, she had no idea the memories we were creating and stuff. And so that's one thing that this movie reminds me of, is all the memories created with my father and my brother, and now with my wife and daughter and stuff. And it's just,
it's the family traditions.
It is. I mean, it's a fly fishing movie, but it's really a movie about family, is what it
Absolutely.
is. So, yeah, it gets me a little emotional. So it's, yeah.
Well, one thing I notice is this movie feels like it takes place over the course of one summer.
Right.
Is how it is kind of told in the story.
Yeah.
But in actuality, when Norman returns from Dartmouth College, it's like 1924, I believe.
Yeah, because they have that little break. I mean, it happened to the kids, but once he comes back, it seems like that's just one summer, right there.
He's fresh in college.
Yeah.
And then at the end of summer, he's been offered the professorship in Chicago.
Yeah.
But in reality, if that's 1924 and Paul's death is actually 1932.
Yeah.
It's a few year span of the story, but
a little bit
again, but the way they tell the story, and I love that Robert came up with that idea of the narrator.
Oh yeah.
It's just memorable.
Completed the movie so well. It just, yeah.
So speaking of Paul's death, let's go ahead and hear about that.
Sure.
As time passed, my father struggled for more to hold on to, asking me again and again had I told him everything. And finally I said to him, maybe all I really know about Paul is that he was a fine fisherman. You know more than that, my father said. He was beautiful. Indirectly, though, Paul was always present in my father's thoughts. I remember the last sermon I heard him give, not long before his own death.
Each one of us here today will, at one time in our lives, look upon a loved one who is in need and ask the same question. We are willing to help, Lord, but what, if anything, is needed? For it is true we can seldom help those closest to us. Either we don't know what part of ourselves to give, or more often than not, the part we have to give is not wanted. And so it is those we live with and should know who elude us. But we can still love them. We can love completely.
Looking at that scene again with the church,
yeah,
it does make me realize they didn't actually use the real church. It's very similar in architecture, but it's not actually the church.
Are you sure? 'Cause that was the one thing I thought they actually used was the church, because I thought I remember going up to it.
This is what the church actually looked like in 1910.
So that's not the actual church, but that church that they used is in Missoula. It's right off Orange Street. That's what it was. So the church in that scene is not the actual church that Norman's dad was a part of and stuff, but that church is right off of Orange Street. It's just like a block off of it. And it's in
absolutely.
Yeah, so that's what it was. Is they used that, they found a church in Missoula and used that for that opening, that scene there of the church. But yeah, that's definitely not the actual church that Norman's dad was the preacher at. So
no, in fact, I don't know if you know this. They actually, I believe it was 2002. Erected a memorial for John McClane. Now, this is his father, not John McClane from Die Hard.
Right.
So we're clear. But it does say, in memory of Dr. John Norman McClane, pastor of the First Presbyterian Church from 1909 to 1925, whose love of God, family, and creation inspired the story. A river runs through it. And the construction of the sanctuary designed by his friend and church member, Missoula architect A.J. Gibson.
That's awesome.
So I thought that was pretty cool.
That is really cool. There's also, I believe, there's some memorial for Norman McClane in Missoula as well too, like some kind of post. And I think it's by the actual old McClane house or something like that someone did. I saw not long ago on one of the fly fishing websites, someone posted it, something like that. But definitely a lot of Missoula history there. It's that last scene when the gentleman, old Norman, is fishing in the river, reminds me of my grandfather, Ludwig Loren. I mean, kind of looks like him, and just the way he's just. It gives me chills every time I watch it, and damn near brings me to tears, just because I didn't know him very well, but I know he was a really good fisherman. Because my mom grew up poor, and he'd bring home fish all the time from the Blackfoot and from Rock Creek and different things like that. And yeah, it's seeing that it just brings all sorts of emotions up and stuff.
And it's funny you mentioned that he reminds you of your grandfather.
Yeah,
because he reminds me of my grandfather.
Yeah, exactly. I think that was
for me. My grandfather was not only into fishing, ice fishing, but my biggest memory of him is hunting.
Hunting, yep. And that was, I mean, I think for a lot of us growing up in Montana, that fishing, hunting, anything outdoors was, I mean,
it's Montana.
It is. I mean, it's right there. And I mean, for me, growing up there, I just thought that's how it was everywhere. You know, you don't realize it until you get older or move away, and it's like, oh wow, you know, that is a pretty special place.
Yeah.
It's funny because being from Missoula, you know, and I've lived in Rapid City now for 15 years, but when someone's asked me where I'm from, I still say Missoula. Oh, yeah, I live in Rapid City. I'm from Missoula. You know, I'm from Montana. It'll always be my home and stuff. And a lot of times too, when people hear, "Oh yeah, I'm from Missoula," why did you move? Because so many people that have just visited, they just can't believe that someone would ever leave there. And well, I'm sure like you, it's everybody wants to live there, so it's hard to find a job there sometimes, and sometimes you got to move out elsewhere. So
absolutely,
it's definitely amazing in the past 20 years. I mean, you think 40 years, how much Missoula's expanded. Even in the last 20 years and 10, it's crazy how fast that place has grown. And really, I mean, you think about it, Missoula's not an old town. You know, it's in the scheme of things in the United States and other things, it's a pretty young town still. You know.
But it's definitely home to, I know, something you and I both love, and that would be Washington Grizzlies Stadium.
Oh yeah, and the University of Montana Grizzlies.
And all right, well, let's see the scene we were alluding to beforehand, because
that final scene is something else. So let's watch that.
Eventually, all things merge into one, and a river runs through it. The river was cut by the world's great flood and runs over rocks from the basement of time. On some of the rocks are timeless raindrops. Under the rocks are the words, and some of the words are theirs. I am haunted by waters.
In there looks a lot like the Red Rock area with the big cliffs and stuff. And I know it's not, boy, it sure does. Wow. Yeah, it's you know, like I was saying earlier, my dad always said, if you're quiet enough, you can hear the river talking to you. And it's true. You know, if you get on the river long enough, it's just like it's that crackling and just it's so mesmerizing and stuff. Something else that we've always done is when we leave the river, we'll put our hand down in it and thank the river for everything it's doing for us and stuff. Just thank it. I know some people might think that's weird, but it's just one of those things we've always done. And I do it to this day when I'm fishing, even little streams and stuff. Just, I finally realized how lucky we are to have places like this still, that we can go and do things like fly fishing and get away. With all the crazy things that are going on in the world right now, that's one thing a person can still do and be safe, and everything else is get up in the woods and fly fish, you know.
Absolutely.
It's something that no one can take away from us, is getting out and enjoying the wilderness and things like that. So that end scene is just, I mean, pulls at the old heartstrings, especially with the old guy, and he looks like everybody's grandpa, I think. You know,
yeah, he absolutely does.
They casted that so well, and then having Robert Redford's elegant voice doing the narration,
and that pause, right?
Like, come on, man.
Between the talking about being still and hearing the words underneath.
Yeah.
And then I'm haunted by waters.
Yeah.
Yeah, just.
That's that quote. They didn't change that as the actual quote from Norman McLean. A few years back, I found there's a guy in Billings, Montana, that makes wooden fly fishing boxes. And he'll put on one, he's got a CNC router, and he'll put on one side your favorite river, and the other side whatever you want. And so I hadn't made for my dad. On one side, it has the Blackfoot River, because that's always been our river. And on the other side was the end quote from Norman McLean, talking about the waters and how you could hear, below them are the words. The only thing I didn't put in there was I'm haunted by waters. I ended it before that because my dad doesn't feel that way. He loves the river and stuff. And, my dad isn't one to get very emotional, but when we gave that to him for Father's Day, he couldn't talk. So that just goes to show you how powerful that quote, and I mean that river itself is to like myself and our family. So
yeah,
my wife always jokes that she's like, watching that movie reminds me of your dad and you and your brother. She's like, it's weird, but it does, even though you grew up way later than that, but just that whole feeling and stuff. Because once she got married with me, we started taking her up to the Blackfoot and showing her some of our special spots. And I'm not going to tell you where this one is, but you got to go. You have to know where a certain path is to get through here, and it's kind of hidden. And yeah, I mean, it's something else to go back in there. And the cool thing is even to this day, I mean, I can still find that probably in the dark and walk in and out. So,
yeah, I can think of a few places where, just you need to clear your head. I easily could find a place back in Missoula, go and just clear my mind.
I know that's one thing with work and stuff, man. The nice thing about the Blackfoot too is no cell service and stuff. So there's times when I've gone back to Montana and just spent a few days up in that Blackfoot corridor just to get the stress relieved and just get fresh again, and that's one thing that area will do for you.
I've gotten lucky. There's been a few times where in the dark, we'll go out and watch the meteor showers.
Oh yeah.
In August, and I found a spot next to the Carson River, or at least close enough, where we'll set our lawn chairs up, and we hear the Carson River just flowing near us.
Yeah.
And we're watching those meteor showers, and it's just
peaceful.
It's mesmerizing. It absolutely is.
Yeah, it is.
So, well, Luke, thank you for joining me on this episode.
My pleasure.
Look forward to hopefully discussing another movie or two with you.
Yeah, that would be excellent. I really appreciate being on here with you.
All right. Thank you.